We are excited to share valuable information to help you plan, prepare, and prosper. Brought to you by the Wealth Management Team at County National Bank.
I'm Christopher Phillips, Senior Wealth Manager with County National Bank. With me today is Holly Baker.
Hello, Christopher.
So happy to be here today. Today we're going to talk about estate planning, what it is, some basic concepts, and we'll move forward from there. So Holly, what is estate planning?
Estate planning. Estate planning would consist of putting all of your assets either into a trust or perhaps a will and several other documents.
Great. Is it complex?
It can be. Depending on your asset level, your net worth, it can be complex or it can be simple.
Great. Life is complex, so your estate plan, exiting life, is also complex.
Yes.
So what makes up my estate?
Your estate would consist of all of your assets. So your house, bank accounts, wealth management accounts, brokerage accounts, cars, boats, if you have them. So anything that you own would make up your estate.
So by the end of life, we've probably accumulated quite a bit.
More than you would think.
Yes, and so we need to take care of that, like we've taken care of our home during our lifetime.
Absolutely. You need to plan for it so someone else doesn't plan for you in the end.
Great. So that kind of leads to the next question. You can answer the next question. Who needs estate planning?
Everybody needs an estate plan. Any adult, 18 and older, should have an estate plan.
Great. And what happens if I don't have an estate plan?
If you do not have an estate plan, the state in which you are a resident will decide that for you. So they're going to determine where your assets go, and it may not be where you want them to go.
And one thing we know, we don't like to be told things.
Yes.
So we have control here, and we should exercise that control.
Absolutely. Take control of it while you can.
Right. If I have a trust, and many of individuals do they also need a will?
Yes, you do. Because there could be one thing that you forgot to put in your trust. So you purchased a piece of property up north, completely forgot to title it in your trust. Your will, your pour over will, is what's going to put it into your trust, and then your trust will dictate where your assets go.
And can you talk a little bit about what it means by putting things in the trust?
Yes, so that is funding a trust. You'll often hear your attorney comment on that. So you have titled your assets in your trust. So for example, Christopher, your home, if you have a trust that you've established after your home, you would do a quitclaim deed into your trust that's funding it. So when you pass away, your trust is what's dictating where your assets go.
Great. And it's a good idea to go ahead and on an annual basis check to make sure that all your assets are funded in the trust, because one thing that we see from time to time is that you buy a home, you put it in the trust, and then you sell your Michigan home and you buy a condo in Florida, and through that process and the excitement of getting that condo, you forget to put it in the name of the trust. So it's good to review with your attorney and your advisor all the assets on some sort of regular basis to make sure that they are funded into the trust. If you don't fund the trust, you go through this process that we call probate. What is probate?
So probate is going through the court system. So if you have assets not titled in your trust or do not pass directly to a beneficiary, for example, life insurance, you've named a spouse or a child, then those assets are gathered, an inventory is filed with the court to tell the court what all of your assets are. They take a small percentage, and that is probate.
Got it.
And so there's a time process with that. It's not as daunting as everyone thinks probate is, but there is a way to speed through that process by having a trust.
Yeah, and we know there's lots of famous people who haven't done proper estate planning and their assets have gone through probate. We can talk about several of those, but what we do know about that is that at some point, that information is part of the public domain.
Absolutely. Trusts are private, wills are public.
Great. So we've talked about a trust, and a lot of people have a trust, but for those who do not, could you sort of help define what is a trust?
Sure. So a trust is first a private document. So it will not be recorded with the court. So if I wanted to go see what you had, I will not know, nor will I know how your assets have passed. But a trust is a binding legal document that you've created with an attorney. You will determine which assets, so hopefully you funded it with all of your assets. And then you will put in dispositive provisions. So that will tell the fiduciary or the successor trustee where those assets are going, to whom and how they are going.
Great. So you have a little bit more control, perhaps,
Yes.
And you are the architect of the trust, so you can design the trust within some legal constraints, but you have a lot more flexibility in how those assets, and those, as Holly said, those dispositive terms.
So you hear people say you're controlling from the grave, and that can be the case.
Absolutely, yeah. So the advantage of the trust is that it's private, that you have some control over those assets. You can control from the grave if you need to do that or want to do that. What would be a con to creating a trust and funding the assets into the trust?
Well, I suppose a con of it could be there is an expense to having the trust drafted.
I think that's a good one. And the reality is that it's sort of a pay me now or pay me later attitude with this, because probate, one of the disadvantages of probate, not only is it time consuming, but it can also be costly for the beneficiaries. So you can, one act of love that you can give to your beneficiaries is going ahead and sort of prepaying some of that cost by doing the work in advance so that you can get the assets to the children in an efficient and cost savings way.
Correct.
Got it. We've had clients say, I don't need a trust because all of my assets are titled jointly with my children. But do they need a trust?
More often than not, I would say people need a trust. And there are, if you take out perhaps tax reasons for a trust, where you say, I don't need a trust because my children are adults and they're financially sound, a lot of times you still need a trust because you don't know what could happen in the future. What if one of your adult children comes into a situation where they now have special needs? If you don't have a trust, then you can't put those assets perhaps into the special needs. If you have one who's a spendthrift, if it's not in a trust and they get it outright, then they may not be able to handle their inheritance as well as they should. So more often than not, I believe people need a trust.
Other than a trust and will, what other documents are usually incorporated into the estate plan?
Sure. So as you said, trust, will, living trust, which is where, or we call it a living trust or a medical directive, which is going to tell the physicians what to do in a medical emergency, what you want to have happen. And then a patient advocate, and that's the individual who's going to speak on your behalf in medical situations when you cannot. And then a durable power of attorney, which is for finances.
Great. So usually there's about 5 documents that will be part of your estate plan. In a will, the person that executes the will, the person who carries out your wishes, is called a personal representative.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that position and how you should come up with whom you name for that role?
Most certainly. So personal representatives, some people still call them executors. That is the individual who's going to handle your estate with respect to the will at the time you pass. Typically in a marital situation, that would be the spouse, but it should be somebody that you trust and you have confidence in, that are going to be able to move forward at the time of your passing and handle all the legal aspects of what your document says.
And likewise, in the trust, you have a trustee, and that person is the person that's carrying out the wishes of the trust when you are no longer serving as the trustee. So again, how do you make that decision on who should serve as the trustee?
Sure, and I always feel like the successor trustee is perhaps a little bit more important than the personal representative because they may have more duties. And so again, it should be somebody that you have confidence in, that you trust, and that you've had conversations and you know that they're going to carry out your wishes as set forth in the document. And sometimes with a trust, those dispositive provisions can be a little bit more stringent than in a will.
Right. Does County National Bank serve as successor trustee?
Yes, we do. We serve as corporate successor trustee.
And tell us why a family or an individual may choose a corporate bank trustee as their successor trustee.
Certainly. So there are several reasons. If you take it purely from the legal aspect of it, there are certain things that need to be done at the time of your passing and handling the settlement of an estate or a trust. So there are statutory requirements that need to be met, and we do that daily. So in our job, we know what those requirements are and we make sure we hit them. As an individual, that may not be what you do every day. And so being able to find out how to do those and where to go can be a challenge. And then there's always the personal side of it. So from a standpoint of, you know, if you name a corporate trustee and they're carrying out the wishes of your trust, if it's fair, meaning everybody gets something equally, then it's not as hard if they get it all outright at the same time. But if you are holding some back to be held in trust, so if you have 2 children and the daughter gets hers outright and the son doesn't, that could cause a problem. And so as corporate trustee, we take on that responsibility, and it doesn't create problems perhaps within the family. So I always say I have no expectation of going to Thanksgiving dinner, so it's easy as a corporate trustee to be the ones to handle those tough conversations.
Absolutely. As a parent, one of the biggest wishes that we have is that our children have fulfilling relationships with their siblings, and financial decisions. Stress is high because their parents have just passed away, so anxiety is a little bit all-time high. So County National Bank can come in and help kind of smooth those rough waters and help them get through that grieving process.
Absolutely.
Holly, thank you so much for your time. If people have more questions, please go ahead and ask those questions in the comment section, whether you're watching on Facebook or LinkedIn, or email us, and we'll be happy to get your question answered. Thank you so much.